Let's speak briefly about Harry and Meghan. I said the other week, we got to the end of the show, because it was all about Andrew. I cannot believe that we have not mentioned Harry and Meghan. Now, they've just gone to Jordan. So they've just flown there, I think, for 2 days. We'll see some lovely pictures and lovely video, and I think it'll be an interesting kind of trip. There's no need for them to get into this debate, is there?
I think that in the same way that the Prince and Princess of Wales did not release a statement after the King's on the day of the arrest, even if Harry and Meghan were here as working royals, if you can imagine that, in 2026, there would be no need for them to release a statement, because this is, as we've said, this is now a very delicate situation as it unfolds legally. The King has made the stance of the palace clear. Harry and Meghan have no ongoing relationship with Andrew that we know of, so there's no reason for them to weigh in. And if they did, it would be, well, it'd be putting their head above the pack and opening themselves up to extra criticism.
Yeah, I think they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, because no doubt, let's say they take part in a broadcast interview with American broadcaster or local broadcaster, any journalist worth their salt is going to ask them, how do you feel about the crisis enveloping your family at the moment? Do you have an opinion on it? If they don't say anything, then they've been silent. If they do say anything, then they're involving themselves in a situation which their own family and the palaces are desperately trying to manage, and have no idea of what is going to happen next. So it's a difficult. I do think it's a difficult situation for them.
But there's no love lost between Harry and Andrew. I don't think they've ever been close.
No.
And I think he's mentioned that in Spare, or he's mentioned that in the past, that they're not exactly, bosom buddies or close pals or anything like that.
All those claims were out there about Andrew, obviously, after the Newsnight interview. And Harry's book came out a couple of years later, but obviously before this latest, with the Epstein files. But even back then, he did write in his book, as you say, he mentioned the sex crimes and the shameful, he used the word shameful, so it's very clear, if he's willing to put that to paper, even back then, that there is no level of closeness between the pair.
Do you think in many ways they're vindicated in getting out, getting away?
I saw this in a comment piece this week, and it was sort of, Harry has been proved right. This family is absolutely toxic from the inside. Harry had his own reasons for leaving, didn't he? And I think they were formulated many, many years ago, certainly not necessarily in the whole Meghan era. He's always wanted a different path, and certainly I don't think it's anything to do with Andrew. And he'd probably be wise to keep his counsel in this sense, especially because there's police investigations as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, this family.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
And we are living in a truly unprecedented time. This is extraordinary. The King having to make a statement after his brother was arrested, ensuring the public that the law will take its course. It's an incredible period.
Someone tweeted me, or X'd me, whatever you call it, after the flurry of storylines over the weekend, or the flurry of stories over the weekend. Someone tweeted me, X'd me, and said, I'm bored with this storyline.
Yeah.
It's not a storyline,
no,
but
it's actually happening, yeah.
It feels like it's an HBO production or some kind of, Netflix series. If it was, some of these storylines are absolutely outrageous.
You really cannot have imagined, back when 2020 was unfolding and there was global drama with COVID and all that, but we had Harry and Meghan leaving the royal family, and it felt like the most explosive possible thing to hit the royal family. If you fast forward 6 years, and honestly, look at this headline, it's crazy to even wrap your mind around it. I won't be bored of this storyline for a long time, but again, it's because we have moved into such an unprecedented era, and you never really know where it's going to go.
Everybody's got an opinion on it.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely everybody.
Yeah. Well, let's bring some light into the proceeding, shall we, Russell? I want to talk about your book.
Thank you.
I'm going to quickly grab it. Yeah, I've got it down here. I've actually got 3 copies.
I know you've got more copies than me.
He carries it around. He just carries it around like that all the time.
3 of these copies now. I'm going to get one signed in a minute as well, if that's all right.
Very kind.
I'll just keep this down here. Tell us about the book. I remember you disappeared about 6 months ago, and we didn't hear from you for a couple of weeks, and it turned out that you were putting this book together. It's a great read. What I like about it is it is a love story at the end of the day. Although they are, the future king and queen, and really see them out on engagements, you detail how they kind of got together at university in the early days and how they worked together. What did you learn most about William and Catherine in your book?
Well, an awful lot. When I was thinking about writing a book, I couldn't believe it had been 10 years since a joint biography had been published. So, that was an angle. But I went into it with an open mind, and I thought that you tell the story of the inside behind the scenes of what had happened and how they'd experienced, these huge flashpoints of the last few years. Not only Catherine and the King's cancer diagnosis, obviously the Andrew situation, Harry and Meghan, but also, the Queen's death and how that had maybe changed their view and their perception, their vision for a modern monarchy. But it really did fall into the category of a love story. So I went right the way back and charted, from the moment that they met and how that changed and shaped both of their lives. And I think that you look into their very, very different upbringings and to who who they are as people today, is a really interesting story to tell.
Well, it's called William and Catherine: The Intimate Inside Story, and in the past there's been a lot of myths that I think have come out about the couple, and one of them was that Catherine and her mother somehow conspired to send her to university to snare the prince. But what I found really interesting, you wrote what actually happened.
Well, that was an underscored by The Crown, which is why so many people think that is the narrative. But certainly, I did want to correct some of the issues if they'd come up. And Catherine had met another teenager when she was on her gap year with Raleigh International in Chile. And she was thinking about changing university. She wasn't necessarily sure if she wanted to go to Edinburgh because a lot of sort of the old school set, the old public school set were going. And she met another teenager who convinced her to go to St Andrews. And that sort of corrects that narrative of, was she chasing the prince? I'm sure there were certain individuals who did change their course and even change their life plan to follow Prince William to go to St Andrews, but it certainly wasn't Catherine.
Can't blame them for shooting their shot. It
It was really interesting going back into the weeds of the old coverage and back in those times of interviews with young women who had changed their course to try and snare a prince, perhaps. But a really interesting period.
One thing I did like was, Phil, we talk about it, one of the things I liked was the difference in decision-making between William and Catherine, because throughout, and we'll talk about it in a minute, about there's been some dramas, obviously, and there's been rows, with Harry, there's been fights with Harry, etc. But there seemed to be William and Catherine approach things in a different way, which I found surprising.
Yeah, certainly. And what it did surprise me as well is how much of an integral part Catherine is with the institution. I think that a lot of people think, of course, she's one of the most famous people in the world, one of the most photographed, she's glamorous at all stages, whether she's visiting the Scouts or a state banquet. But what came up time and time again of speaking to people who had worked with them for years was how invested she is in the process, how invested she is with the vision of the monarchy. Not even necessarily their vision of becoming a future king and queen, but she is very interested in the future of the foundation. She's very across the strategy. And I think what really surprised me is how much William relies on her. Not just professionally, they work together most days, but also personally and emotionally as well. And there are certain flashpoints you can look to, whether it was their breakup or whether it was issues with dealing with her cancer treatment and diagnosis, that there was a real interesting point of how solid they are as a couple.